Okay, cool. I'm super happy to be back. And like Ryan said, this is our second workshop. Last time we talked about leadership communication and we touched on storytelling, but we couldn't go really deep. But that's okay because that's what we're here to do today, to go deeper on storytelling techniques specifically for product managers. And this is one of the most effective communication techniques that we could use to really connect with our audience. And today I have two applications that I want to share with you. One is applying storytelling to your self-introduction, and two is applying storytelling in your product reviews and product pitches. So, to get us started, I want to introduce myself, and I'm going to introduce myself in two different ways. And I'm going to ask you to pay attention to the differences between the two. Here's the first introduction. Hello, everybody. My name is Nancy Chu, and I am a PM leadership coach. I pivoted into full-time coaching about a year ago, and I've since coached about 80 product managers in the last year. Overall, I have nearly 20 years of experience in tech. And most recently, I was product director of product at Roku, and before that, I was PM manager at Facebook Meta. Before going into B2C, I worked in big B2B companies as well as B2B startups. So the big companies are Symantec, Oracle, and ExxonMobil. And I worked at three different startups after that before I joined Meta. All of that is to say that if you are looking for more support in your career development, if you are trying to prepare for your next interviews to get into big tech or trying to transition from IC to people management or trying to decide if you want to go from startups to big companies, I could help you. And to learn more about me and to connect and get to know me better, you can find me on my website or on my LinkedIn. And I look forward to getting to know you better. So, this is the first version of my self introduction. Let me introduce myself again in the second version. Hello, everybody. My name is Nancy Chu, and I'm a PM leadership coach. I pivoted into full-time coaching a year ago, and I've been helping ambitious product leaders in demanding roles accelerate their growth with more ease, focusing on their leadership communication. Now, it wasn't that long ago when I used to be very insecure about my own communication skills. In fact, I remember my SAT verbal score was only in the 500s. So I've never been someone who was good with their words and never been someone who's good in English. And in fact, it was said to me by my engineering manager after I became a product manager that I'm just not an effective PM. And he didn't give me this feedback in a one-on-one setting. He made this comment in front of other people on my last day at work when I was saying bye to everyone. And that was just the opposite of what I wanted to hear on my last day, right? What I wanted to hear is, oh, it was so good working with you. But that's not what happened. But eventually, I found ways and tools to improve my craft. And luckily, I was coached on storytelling. And after I started to apply these techniques and these concepts, my career grew and I went on to hit really exciting milestones. For example, I was rewarded with additional equity 3 years in a row when I was at Meta for being a top performer. And I also got to present next to Mark Zuckerberg. And that is why I'm so excited and so passionate to help you with your storytelling and your communication. And if I had to pick a shape to describe and illustrate my career history, I would pick a check mark. And that's because I started off pretty well as a software engineer. And then I successfully pivoted into product. But after that, my career dipped because I was just not effective and largely was due to my communication. But after I got better at storytelling and got better at communication, my career grew, hence the check mark. And that is why I'm really excited about this workshop to share these techniques with you so that you can use the power of storytelling for your own transformation. The minute you start to use your words and your stories to inspire action, you can also transform other people's lives as well as your life. Thank you so much for having me here today with you. So, what differences have you observed in these two self introductions? Put it in the chat and let me know. Second one is more emotion, more me, yes. And yes to Nicole, the first version is a list of accomplishments. It's basically a list of data points. But the second one has a relatable experience, is more emotional, a lot more personable. Yes. And that is exactly what I want to demonstrate and share with you today on the effectiveness of telling stories with your words. In the first version, I shared with you some data points. But in the second one, I shared with you stories that are more likely to help me connect with you better. And why do you think that is? I think most people believe that storytelling can connect people, but how? In what ways? Well, let's talk about brain science. If you look at brain scans of people listening to data, which is the red brain, and the blue brain would be the brain that is the brain scan of someone listening to stories. When we're listening to numbers and data points and looking at charts and tables, two parts of the brain would light up. And these are the parts of the brain that helps you uh, interpret data and understand math. But if you look at the blue brain, what happens in the brain when you listen to stories is the entire brain lights up. Now, what happens when your entire brain lights up? You start to pick up all kinds of signals and you start to feel feelings and you start to feel emotions a lot more because you're listening to stories. And this is also why when we watch a movie, we feel all kinds of feelings, right? We get really happy or we get really excited, or sometimes we get scared, or sometimes we feel sad when the puppy dies, right? And we know that it's not real. And yet we're feeling these emotions. Why? It's because that's how our brain works. Our brain actually can't really differentiate a real experience versus a story. And that is why when we tell stories, we're able to get the other person to feel a lot more. And when people feel a lot more feelings, you are basically activating all the senses in the body, and we feel very connected to the storyteller. And here's another data point that I want to share with you using brain science. If you look at the brain scan of the storyteller and the listener, you would see that our brains light up in very similar ways. They mirror each other. And that is what makes us connect better between the storyteller and the listener. If you want people to remember you, if you want to stand out, if you want to form a connection, and you use storytelling to do so, it really speaks to the brain. And this is the scientific explanation to why storytelling is so effective. So, knowing science and knowing this is how our brains work, if you want to stand out, if you want people to remember you, what better way can you utilize other than storytelling? Well, I think storytelling is probably the most effective way for us to do that. So I also want to share with you this pattern that I have observed about career advancement, whether we're going from individual contributor to manager or from manager to executive, whatever your current level is, and you want to get to the next level, there's this pattern where when we get really good in our current level, we become the expert in the data. And the data here is not necessarily just numbers and facts. It's really just the details about the ins and outs and all the insights that you have. You're the expert of the area in your current level, and no one else knows this better than you. Now, to get to the next level, though, just knowing the data is not enough. And getting really good at knowing the data requires us to be using our analytical skills, but that actually does not help us inspire other people to take action. And that's what we need at the next level. The next level requires us to inspire action in others using the data that we know. And that is the difference between the people who are really good in our current level versus the people who could get to the next level. So when we get really good in the data that we know, we are exercising our analytical muscles. And the analytical muscles are different muscles from the skills that we need to inspire action in others. And that muscle is rooted in communication and storytelling. When we get really good with communicating with people and we are able to connect with them, we can inspire action. And that is what leaders need to do. They need to inspire action based on the data that they know. And that is what we're here to talk about today. So let's start by talking about storytelling 101, which is a universal structure. And this is the structure that most stories follow. We have the hero in the story, and the hero meets the villain, and they go on this journey with the hero's friends and the mentors and the teachers to fight this villain, and they have happy ending after that. This is the hero's journey that most of the stories follow. And in my self-introduction, I'm the hero and the villain is my 500 SAT verbal score and my not so good communication skills. But then I went on this journey and then now I reach my happy ending. So that is my hero's journey in my self-introduction. What happens if we try to apply this for a product that we're managing? So let's do a quick thought exercise and let's imagine that we're the PM of a transportation app. And this app helps us with carpools and parking spots, finding real-time traffic, routing information, saving time and money. Okay, so let's imagine that we're the PM for this particular product. And what happens if we turn it into a story? Well, it would sound something like this, where the hero is the commuter and the villain is the frustrating commute. And then we go on this journey to use the app, and now commute is easier now. And that is a happy ending because the app is now the solution to the hero's problem. So if I were to tell the story, it would sound something like this to follow this framework. Meet Sarah, a working professional who struggles with the daily grind of commuting. One day she discovers a transportation app that makes her commute easier and more efficient. Thanks to the app, Sarah is now able to start her day on a positive note. Okay, so that is storytelling 101. And most people who understand storytelling would tell the story in this way. But let's try to take it up a notch. And that's because there's the big delta when you go from 101 to 201. In 101, most of the storytellers would position themselves as the hero. And then they would tell the story that way. And in those stories, they focus a lot about me, here's what I could do. But in 201, we actually want to consider the audience as a hero, not the storyteller. We're not the hero. So in this case, because the goal that we're trying to achieve is to really connect with the audience, we want to position the audience as the hero of our story. We actually want them to see themselves in the hero's journey. And that is how you go from 101 to 201. And how do we do that? We do that by turning features into feelings, by adding emotions to bring them into the story because now they're the hero. So let's go back to our transportation app example. So how do we get them to be the hero? Well, one, I could utilize some data points to share with you about some of the struggles that working professionals might have. That's one approach that I could take. But a different approach and a better approach is to get you to feel certain feelings, right? That is the purpose of storytelling. I want you to feel a certain way. And to do that, I need to know my audience. And imagine that I am presenting in front of a leadership team or executives team or VCs. I could assume that most people understands struggles of a working parent. So instead of just positioning the hero as a working professional, now I'm turning the hero into a working parent. And most of the people would feel a lot more feelings if I start to talk about the struggles that a working parent would go through, especially a working mom who has to hold a baby in front of the computer trying to work. So instead of telling you some data points about working parents or working moms, I could just show you this image. And when I show this image to you, you're more likely to feel certain emotions just looking at it. Everyone can imagine what it's like. Either you have experienced it on your own, or your friends, or your family, or you could just picture yourself holding a baby and try to do work at the same time. Now you're feeling more pain. And this is an example and a tactic of how you position the audience as the hero of this hero's journey. So now this is step one of bringing them in to this journey with us. So Sarah, she is a working mom of young kids, constantly juggling family responsibilities with work. And this is just her life. And now let's introduce the villain. The villain is the commute. So again, I can show you some data points about how many cars are on the street or how long people sit in traffic, etc. But a more effective way of getting you to feel a certain way is to show you an image that looks like this. Now, most people would feel certain feelings because we've probably all experienced traffic and commute that looks something like this, bumper to bumper. So when you see an image like this, you are probably thinking about the last time when you had to sit through this. And when you're thinking about this and when you're remembering these old feelings, you would start to realize now the true villain is not the commute itself, but the guilt and the stress that you would feel after you sit through something like this. So the true villain is not commute, is not the frustrating commute, but what happens afterwards. So our working mom, Sarah, after she sits through this day after day, she no longer has the energy to be present for her family, right? She no longer has the energy to play with her kids and to help them with homework. And that is a true villain because of the guilt as a result of this. So now this is the setup of the story that we're trying to tell. And if I were to tell it in this framing by turning my features into feelings, it would sound something like this. Sarah, a working professional and mom of two young kids who tries to balance work with family responsibilities every day. But a transportation app changes everything, and now she could carpool with other parents and she could spend more time with her family. So, this is how my story would sound at the 201 level. So let's summarize quickly what we just worked on together. In a story, you have a hero's journey, which is made up of the what is and the what could be. And this framing is something I learned from a communications expert. Her name is Nancy Duarte. So the what is the current state. The current state has a villain in it. What could be is the future state. It's the happy state. And that is the hero's journey. And we want to bring the audience into the story because they're the true hero, not us. So a story is made up of a combination and the contrast between the what is and the what could be. So now that we brought the audience into the story with us, which is the product world, we now need to come back to the real world. And let's think about what does the audience want? So what do executives want at the end of the day? They really just want three things for the most part. They want top line, they want market share, and they want engagement in the product. Typically speaking, this is what they want. So when we come back and bring them back from the product world to the real world, we again want to do the same contrast between the what is and the what could be. These three things would be the what could be. And so here is where we can highlight the difference by making the ask to invest or whatever support that you want them to provide you, because you want to contrast between the what is and the what could be. The what is what's at stake, or the what is the current state. If you were to make this investment, then we could help you achieve the three things that you care about, right? So that is the difference between the contrast between the what is and the what could be. So I want to answer a question from Duncan earlier. How do we improve listener retention of the story's most important beats? Well, hopefully I have actually answered this question, because the answer is we want to get the audience to feel feelings and emotions. When they start to see themselves as the hero of the hero's journey, they would remember a lot more. And like I said before, using brain science, we know that when our entire brain lights up, we are feeling feelings and we're feeling emotions. And that is why we remember movies, or at least we remember the feelings that we felt. That is how we get them to remember us, and that's how we get them to care. So, second question from Duncan is, how do you anticipate the sort of stories a given listener or a group will connect with? Or this is where we really need to find out what they care about. So, in the transportation app example, I am making the assumption that you all care about a good experience balancing work and home. And I'm making the assumption that you understand how it feels to sit through traffic. I'm making the assumption that you probably understand the struggles of a working parent, right? These are all the assumptions that I'm making to get you to care about our hero. In this case, it's Sarah. So this is storytelling 201. We want to bring the audience into the journey with us because they're the actual hero of the story. And we want to bring them from the product world back to the real world by laddering up to what they actually care about, which is retention or market share or top line. Now, we don't always talk to an internal audience, right? Sometimes we have to talk to the general public. General public no longer cares about your top line or your market share or your engagement. So again, it's all about finding out what the general public cares about. And that is storytelling 301, a sense of purpose. What is sense of purpose? Purpose means something bigger than you and I. It's laddering up to something very important to all of humanity. That's what purpose is, and that's how we connect with the general public. So let's walk through some of these examples. Apple. Apple isn't selling computers. They're selling a dream where creative people have the tools to change the world. That is Apple's purpose. Now, what about Tesla? They're not just selling cars, right? They're helping to accelerate the world's transition to sustainable energy. So these are examples of purpose that is really high up, very important to all of humanity. That is how we connect with the general public. So let's bring it back to our transportation app. What would be a good sense of purpose for our transportation app? Here's an example. We're here to build community and connect people. We can reduce traffic and carbon emission. What does this mean? It means that we're now being very good citizens of our world, and we are part of this world connected to everybody else. But that's not it, because what's more important is for every minute where people don't have to drive alone, they also get thousands of hours of time back for themselves. We're giving people the gift of time. And that's huge, because what is more precious than time? We're only losing time. We're not gaining time, right? And if we look at all the other apps we have on our phone, they all take time away from us. They want our engagement, they want our retention. But our transportation app is different. We're here to give people the gift of time, because when you're not driving alone, that time is now yours. You could choose how you want to spend that time. So if I were to use this framing and tell the story, it would sound something like this. Sarah, A working professional and mom of 2 young kids faces the challenge of balancing work with family every single day, but our transportation app changes everything. She can now carpool with other parents. The app reduces traffic and also builds community. Now she can spend more time with her family. She is now given the gift of time. And that means the app isn't just a solution for her commute problems. It is now a way of life. It is a new way of life, and it is the better way of life. And that is storytelling 301, laddering up to a bigger sense of purpose. So let's summarize. In Storytelling 101, we are following this universal structure, taking the hero through the hero's journey. Now, in 201, we are adding emotions, and this is where we're turning the list of features into feelings, and we are bringing the audience into the story with us and positioning them as the hero. And in 301, we're introducing a sense of purpose that is laddering up to something really big that humanity would care about. So that is a general progression of how you could get better at storytelling. And I have a favorite quote from the expert I mentioned earlier, Nancy Duarte. The difference between the great idea that gets adopted and a great idea that gets rejected is based solely on how someone communicates. The difference in getting adopted versus getting rejected is not how good or bad this idea is. The idea is the same, the great idea, but with great communication, you get that great idea adopted versus getting that great idea rejected. It's about how you position your great product idea and how you bring the audience into your world with you. Nancy Duarte is a communications expert and also known as a presentation lady. And here's another quote that I also love, which is talking about the same thing, but just using different words. And that quote is, the content makes people respect you, but the story makes people become loyal to you. The content in this case would be the data points that you share. Basically, the first version of my self intro. I gave you a lot of data points. That's just content. And you might respect me because of the content, but the story makes people become loyal to you. And this is a quote from Lisa Nichols, one of my favorite motivational speakers. And that is why it is important to start practicing storytelling in your day to day. That is why I want to help you with your storytelling right now in our workshop. So let me just check the time. Okay, so 30 minutes. I want to start with, because I want to cover 2 different topics. One is using storytelling in your self-introduction, and the second one is using storytelling in your product pitch or product review. So let's start with self-introduction. In the self-introduction, I have a 3-part framework that helps you tell your story. First part of the framework is when you want to just explain and state your level of experience in one line. We don't want to spend too much time in the first part of the introduction. And that's because, again, we're not the hero. The audience is the hero. So in my self-introduction, my one-liner would be, I have nearly 20 years of experience in tech, or I have been a full-time coach for 1 year. That's it. Now, moving on to the second part of this framework, this is now really focusing on the audience. They are the hero, not you. So you want to talk about why this role or why this matters, assuming that you're introducing yourself in a job interview context. You want to spend most of your time in part 2 of the story. Why them? Then that is the importance of this framework. And then the third part of the framework is actually the power move that I will reveal later. So let's start with number 1. This is your level of experience in one line. I've been doing X for Y years, for example, and that's it. One-liner, because the hero is not you. The hero is the audience. So we want to keep this very short and concise. And then part 2 of this framework is Why this role? We want to make this more about them. They are the hero. Why them? What value can you bring for them? And when we do this, we're also putting them in a good mood. And when they're in a good mood, this is a great way to start the interview. Typically, you're asked to introduce yourself, and we want to do our best to get them to feel good. And that will be how you set the stage for the rest of the interview. So it would sound something like this. I saw how your product changes lives in XYZ ways, or I experienced XYZ because of your product. So in my example, I would say, because of my experience in storytelling, it saved my career. That would be how I could implement this. So that's why I'm so passionate about your mission. So in my case, I said, that's why I'm so excited to share storytelling with you, because my strength is in XYZ. So I'm looking for a role where I know I could help drive a lot of value. So notice in this framing, we're making the audience the hero. We're talking about them because they're the true hero. And that is how we could lay a good foundation for the rest of the interview. The rest of the interview is about you. But in the beginning, we should make it about them. So now let's talk about part 3 of this framework, which is the power move. 99% of the candidates don't do this unless you're one of my clients. If you're one of my clients, or now you, after attending this workshop, you will get this power move. I have very good data points that prove this is a real needle mover. Just today, one of my clients told me that in their conversation with a recruiter, they got advanced to the next role in 17 minutes. So when we follow this model, we're more likely to convert our audience. So for me, I use the same model when I have sales calls with my prospects. I'm trying to convert them into a client. I use the same playbook. And for you, if you're in a job interview, you can use this playbook because you're trying to convert the recruiter into a formal interview. So the power move is this. After you get them to feel very good about themselves, now you say, oh, you must see thousands of profiles or resumes a day. What prompted you to reach out? What about my profile and resume spoke to you? And why is this such a power move? It's because now you're asking them to say nice things about you. And when they say nice things about you, they will also feel good about you. And so the first part of this framework is you're saying things about them, about how you can add value. You're getting them to feel good. And then you ask them to say nice things about you. You're getting them to feel good about you. And then you could go on with the rest of your interview. And I call this the beer goggles effect. So when we drink beer at a bar, everyone looks a lot more attractive. This is the same effect. This is the beer goggles effect in an interview setting. First, you get them to feel good about themselves, then you get them to feel good about you. And then you can go on with the rest of your interview. So that is my 3-part framework to your self-introduction. I want to give you 2 minutes to work on part 2 of this framework, which is the bulk of it. Why this role? And I'll put this up on the screen so you can remember how to frame this. So at the 40-minute mark, I want to ask for a volunteer to share with us their framing of why this role. This is where I wish I could play some music.
Duncan, you're up again.
Dun, 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 dun. Yeah. Dun, 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 dun. Yeah. Dun, 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 dun. Hey, dun, 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 cha, dun, 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 dun. Yeah. Dun, 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 dun,
One more
dun.
minute.
Remember this when we're coming up for the ProductBC elections next week. Just saying.
30 seconds. Okay. Do I have a volunteer who could share with us their framing for part 2 of this framework? Why this role?
So I'm talking to a telecommunications company doing B2B software, so that's the context. So I'm passionate about this role because I feel like telecommunications is incredibly important. We use phones every day, and every company does it poorly. Your software opens up opportunities for so many third-party providers to leverage networks and to create more options for consumers.
And that is
I just-
why.
Oh, and that is why I'm a good fit for the role, or then do I flip to the power move?
Not yet. You want to say,
Okay,
that's why I'm so excited, or that's why I'm so
that's why I'm so
passionate.
excited. Okay, yeah, that's why I'm so excited to talk to you today.
Because my strength is in.
Oh, I got to do the full script. Okay, all right. I'm not used to this. Yeah, because my strength is in strategic communication in the product space.
Great. So I'm looking for a role where I can help drive a lot of value.
Yes.
Okay, great. So how do you feel right now, just with this framing?
I think because this comes up in every interview, this would make it a lot easier for these really basic early questions when you know they're coming, as opposed to mostly ad-libbing it based on your research that you've done before.
Yes. And I want to double click on what you said. Telecommunications is important. It's going to open up more opportunities. What does that mean? Opening up to more opportunities.
Um, it could make cell phones cheaper for people and give them more money in their pockets. Something like that. I could lean into the
Yes.
fact that they're opening up the market and they're giving people
Yes.
more options and they're making it cheaper. So
Yes.
yeah, the
And
telecommunications is boring, but how do you flip it into a
that's exactly it. And why is that important? Because now my grandma can also do X as an example.
yes.
So now someone in your family or someone you know can experience this game changer.
Yeah, I'm now seeing also that after this workshop, Nancy, we're definitely going to put these in the YouTube description so that people can copy them out into their workflows and then use them.
Good. Thank you, Ryan, for volunteering to share with us your framing. All right, so I want to move on to the second application of storytelling, which is product pitch. So let me bring that up. All right, so in a product pitch, I have a two-part framework for you. The first part of the framework is, again, the hero's journey. You're introducing the hero, the villain, the happy ending, and then another way of saying this is contrast between the what is and the what could be. Now, the important thing to note here is the hero is not you. The hero is not your end user, depending on who you're talking to. If you're pitching to a executive team or you're pitching to a VC, they're the hero. So why should they care? That's the framing of step one. In terms of the product world, you want to bring them into the product world and make them feel that this product is going to change lives. And then in the second part of the framework is you bring them back into the real world. So what do they want? They want top line, they want market share, they want engagement. And this is the what could be. So the what is a world without this product. And the what could be is top line market share engagement. So when you're making this contrast in your pitch, you have to be really clear on what is it that you're pitching. So the what is the current state. The what could be is the happy state. So we could say something like this to help us get to the happy state. And here is where you want to state their goal or their aspiration. Our product is projected to contribute to X percentage of that. And we'll need your support. That looks something like this. We would need a number of engineers, we would need a number of designers, we need a number of researchers, for example. So this is just an example of how you could provide that contrast between the what is and the what could be. So here, I also want to answer Duncan's question. What are some ways to really signal that the story you're telling really matters? And my answer to this is kind of philosophical, which is by making it matter for you. So if you really believe that it matters, you would know the words to use. You would know the stories to use. And this is where you want to use your words and your stories to inspire action based on the data that you know. So this is how you go from the current level where you're the data expert to the next level when you can use your words to inspire action. So how do you signal that the story really matters? Well, first, it has to matter to you. That's step number one. So going back to Ryan's example, why is what was it? Telecommunications? Why is that important? Why does it actually matter? You want to connect it to something that actually matters to you. So yes, it opens up more opportunities, but what does that mean? How does that matter to you? So you want to start from that angle. And once you get yourself to really care about this, you will then prime your mindset to tell stories that actually reflect what is it that you're feeling in the inner world. So part of this exercise is to get yourself to feel a certain way. And when you're feeling a certain way, then you're naturally more equipped to tell stories. And that's because we all have the storytelling gene. Storytelling is not rocket science. It's not something new. It's not AI. It's not new. It's been passed down from generation to generation for thousands of years, older than the Bible. So we've been telling stories for generations. It's in all of us, and we just have to wake it up. And in fact, we're already very good at telling negative stories about us. So we're really good at saying, oh, we're not good enough. Oh, I can't do that because of XYZ. Or if I do that, then I'm going to hurt people's feelings. Or if I do that, I'm going to let someone down. All of those things are stories that we tell to ourselves. We are really, really good at telling stories. And we just need to apply those muscles where it actually moves the needle for us. So coming back to this question of why it is philosophical is because it starts with you. If you want people to care, then you have to care about it yourself. And with that, if there's only one thing I want you to remember from this workshop is this. Once you change your words, you could change your world and you can change the world for other people. And why is that? It's because people remember stories that make them feel something. That's why we remember moments in the past. We don't remember data or math or tables or graphs. We remember stories because the stories make us feel something. With that, it's a wrap, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have. I also like the Shrek theme. Thank you.
I have a question. Sorry, I hope I'm not cutting anyone. Is there a way you wanted to take questions?
Go ahead, and we'll take Alex after.
Oh, I'm so sorry about that.
Don't worry about it. Come on in.
I guess since we're talking about storytelling, I'm like really impressed with your storytelling through this talk and this presentation. And so I wanted to ask, like, how do you get so comfortable to, like, the way you're telling it feels so natural? Like how much do you practice? Are you reading off of a script? If you don't mind sharing those.
No, I don't mind at all. And this is a great question. So happy to see you, Kay.
Hi, Nancy.
Yes, I did practice. And that self-introduction where I talked about the two different versions of my stories, that alone took about 1 hour of practice. And I already gave a version of this workshop a year ago. So this storytelling topic was the very first workshop that I gave a year ago when I became a full-time coach. And just for giggles, and it would probably be a good test to how you could get better. If you were to go back to watch my video a year ago, I think that I got better as a storyteller. So that is to say, you would get better at anything if you show up and put in the time. I practiced for this workshop for many, many hours, even though I've already given this talk before. Oh, second part of that question, am I reading something? Initially, when I prepared for the first version of this workshop a year ago, I typed out everything and I memorized it and I practiced the delivery. This time, I didn't have to come up with material entirely, but I have a journal because I don't want to give the same workshop I did last year. I went in and improved some of the aspects of it. I journal out things I want to say and I memorized it and then I practiced.
Thank you so much.
Sure.
Alex, come on in.
Yeah, I feel that so I manage 10 product managers, and as a result, I have to do an absurd amount of reporting. I find it challenging to make any of that reporting exciting or captivating. And personally, I get feedback that I'm often too granular. How do I turn something as potentially mundane and boring like reporting into great storytelling? Like you gave a bunch of different frameworks for interviews and product pitch. To have a formula for something as boring as like status updates or weekly reporting, or yeah.
Who are you reporting to and what are you reporting?
I am reporting to the head of product, or yeah, pretty much head of product or general manager.
And what do they care about?
Mostly what my primary goal is, which is growing users.
Okay. And in these reports, how are you framing how you're growing users?
Yeah, that's probably a great way to put it. But trying to share the areas of focus.
Yes.
But then they tend to want to know tactics, but the moment I go into tactics, then it's oversharing. So it's
Do
like, how
they
do I,
actually care about tactics?
maybe they don't. Maybe
Not
they don't.
really. They probably just want to know where you need support.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's a contrast between the what is and the what could be.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what they care about. And usually from their perspective, it's, well, how can I help? How are you doing? Like that. And if you think it's boring, then they'll also think it's boring. So how can you make yourself feel better?
Yeah, makes sense.
Great.
That makes sense. Thank you.
Sure.
Alex, how might you change your next session based on this? What's your immediate reflection on how you might actually implement that?
Probably tying some of my initiatives to great decisions that they've made as a start. I like that part of kind of making them a hero. And then calling out what some of the roadblocks were already immediately seen, and yeah, and to your point, like how can they help us or unblock us, and just kind of making sure that they're leaving with like clear requests and clear asks. Yeah, I'm kind of piecing it all together. I've been writing notes, but I don't think I've like made sense of everything I've written so far.
Oh, you can circle back and let us know.
Thanks.
Nicole?
Hi again.
Hi, Nicole.
Uh,
I remember you from last time.
yes, I was very excited for today.
Hey.
Just thinking about your framework in terms of the interview, or like, being in an interview, I'm trying to understand I guess the pros and cons, or perhaps the pitfalls of this format when, for example, your current state is an IC and you're trying to go to a higher level IC versus your current state's an IC and going into a managerial position, which has very different stories that you tell, given that like IC is way more, have you done this? Can you continue doing it at a bigger scale versus can you manage doing these things with other people or delegate? Or at least that's the story I have in my head right now. So I'm curious about what you've heard from your clients or what you've experienced as well.
Well, going to a people management position, it's the same thing. It's have you done this? Have you people managed before? And if you haven't,
yeah,
what skills do you think you could showcase that lowers the gut reaction that they would have? So the gut reaction is, how can you do this job if you have not done it before? So you want to close the gap that they're sensing. And because they are basically freaking out that you don't have the experience.
Right. Because
So
like
how do
thinking,
you, yeah.
oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
Yeah, because just like because thinking ahead like to that framework, with your power move, for example, it's like what stood out from my resume, my whatever that made you want to reach out. With given that that's like the third step, how might you bridge step 2, which is you're trying to stop the freak out, you're containing it, you're getting ahead of it without knowing the third, I guess. Like, is that just an educated guess?
Well, the energy that we want to give off in step 2 is, you know that feeling you get when, let's say you went on a really exotic vacation. So someone might say, oh my God, you went to Italy. That's so cool. Or, oh my God, you grew up in Hawaii. That's so cool. That's me. I grew up in Hawaii. So when people say that, like, oh my God, that's so cool, you're feeling really good and you're thinking, oh yeah, that is really cool that I went to Italy. Oh yeah, it is really cool. I grew up in Hawaii and I saw rainbows every day. It is really cool. That is basically what we're doing in step 2 is, oh my gosh, your mission is so cool. Or, oh my gosh, your product is a game changer. I saw how your product changes lives. And then you say, my strength is Y, or my experience is in X, and that is how I could add value for you. That is the goal of step 2.
Cool.
You actually don't really need to talk that much about yourself from the get-go. This is a self-introduction because you have the rest of the interview to talk about yourself. That is where they're going to ask you a bunch of questions to close the gap within their own consciousness. So in the self-introduction, it's the first 2 minutes of a 30-minute interview.
The anti-elevator pitch.
Well, you want to put them in a good mood.
Okay. Cool. Thank you.
Sure.
Like it's reframing what the first 2 minutes even means.
Yes,
hard.
it's a big reframe.
Yeah. Thanks so much.
Right, I know we're coming up on the hour here, so I'll look for one last hand. Does anyone have a last question for Nancy? No, so I did see a question in the chat about, is this going to be recorded and where can I find it? So you will find it in 1 to 2 weeks on the ProductBC YouTube channel. I've also shared in the chat Nancy's first session, so if you missed that one, highly recommend it, talking about how to develop charisma in one-on-one or interview settings. And you can almost use it in a lot of different settings. And Nancy also has a YouTube channel. So the reason why we brought her on, a lot of your answers today, Nancy, have been all about emotion. And I think that in the product space, we often get hammered in A/B testing and all these kind of things. And that was a key reason we wanted you to come on, is like, how do we bring more of that emotion and personality to the product space? And we think that you're an excellent coach in that area. So
Thank you so much.
thank you. And then one last pitch for the ProductBC members out there. We are running nominations for the board. So if you are interested in being nominated or well, self-nominated, please nominate yourself for the board if you have any interest. If you don't know what that actually means, being a board member, contact myself, Duncan, or Andrina, who's on the call. We are closing them in the next week or two to get on with the election, as Duncan mentioned earlier. So that is the pitch for ProductBC. So if Duncan, yeah, so you can see down there what running for the board is in the chat if you haven't already hit it, and there's the nomination form. So look at this teamwork. If that's the way we roll. So, and I will give the final mic to you, Nancy, to close out the workshop.
People remember feelings. So what feeling would you like other people to feel? Would be my closing question for you all. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming to our second workshop, and hopefully there will be more workshops to come in the future.
Can I give away a power move too? Just while
Please.
I'm thinking of it. This one's been helpful for me, and I'm sorry to jump in. I know you want to have the last word, but I really feel like I'm going to give away, if you're going to give away a secret move, I'll give away one of mine too. When you're describing a situation, when you're describing a story, bring people into that world a little bit more. Give color, give actual description of, she's sitting in the car. It's hazy, it's warm. The car in front of her just won't move, and she doesn't know how she's going to get home in time to feed her baby and pick her up from the babysitters. The more color you can give at those moments, the more the other listener can clue in to the environment. Put the people in the place where that problem is happening, and the situation comes to life. It's a subtle thing. You don't want to overuse it. But if you can bring people into that world, suddenly the story goes from abstract to something that the listener can actually envision themselves going through. It's been very helpful.
I love that, Duncan. I love that power move.
Now you have the last word for real.
No, it's fine.
Thank you, Nancy. Thank you so much. And to
Thank you,
everyone here,
everyone.
thank you for
Happy
coming out.
Tuesday.